You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network. This is the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunderquack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com, which you can get early every Tuesday over at patreon.com/thunderquack, just like our Patreon producers, Brian Murawski and JJ Samuel do, or you can wait and get it late on every Friday on podcast services across the galaxy. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Conkin.
Oh, that was a rough intro. That was a rough one to get through.
I couldn't have guessed. I wouldn't have guessed it. I forgot.
No, okay.
That's how it starts.
Would you call me a consummate professional then?
You very much. You know, that's how I introduce you to my friends. Is I'm like,
yeah.
Have you met Mike, the consummate professional?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to say it's kind of consummate professional. What, you know, like you could be a consummate professional chef. Be a very different thing from podcasting. Right. Anyways,
that's fair.
We've already been podcasting for like half an hour. Can you tell?
I feel like that's a good thing. Whenever
it is a good thing. Yeah. It's just the conversation that the uncut audience is going to get to hear at the end of this is heavy. It's a little tough, but but it's a good one. Is it worth the $10? I think it is. Obviously not $10 an episode. It's $10 for the month, but it's even less if you pay for the whole year because you get a discount. I don't know. We don't talk about that enough. Patreon added that ability for you to pay annually and for you to put a discount on annual payments. So I mean, like you can get it for cheaper by paying for the whole year. I don't know how I feel about that though, because I like the cash flow of the money coming in every month. But otherwise,
I will say I'm having that what you've just pinged on there is my life issue as an adult right now is being like, is it better for me to be paying in large chunks into my RRSPs or to keep like the cash flow like regular throughout the year? I don't know. I just feel like that's your amortization schedule of life. Is it better to have to budget from the beginning or anyways?
I would say that with money, it is good to be in a habit of saving because otherwise what you end up doing is planning to save for a rainy day and then the rainy day comes and you haven't saved.
Yeah, I will say, so I'm a superstitious person. In weird ways, like for very specific things, like I won't change my calendar until the day that it actually is. Like even if I know, even if like tomorrow is March, I'm not gonna, and it's not, today is March, but it's like I won't flip the calendar before the day. Anyways, I will say that I feel partially responsible for COVID because in planning for the Disney trip that we were supposed to take in 2020, gave you money in February of 2020, planning for the trip, being like, I'm going to give like little increments of money so that then I make the burden of saving onto Mike. And so it's just like a thing where it's like, I jinxed it by trying to like plan, like give money for a specific thing that hadn't quite come to fruition yet. I don't know. It's just like a weird, like, so I have like, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. It was just like a thing that I like have been thinking about recently where I'm like, man, I wonder how much I jinxed our like trip to Disneyland by trying to like be proactive about saving for it.
Yeah. So. I think you're blaming the inevitability of a global economy and and a shrinking world on your inability to save money.
Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, what you're saying is I can't put money away because if I do, global pandemics happen.
Exactly.
I really don't think that that's the case, and I know that you don't think that that's the case, but I know that you also kind of think that that's the case.
Right?
And one of my favorite things about doing this podcast with you, Amanda, is giving the rest of the world, or at least the people who listen to us, this view into what I have to kind of put up with being your friend from time to time, and certainly vice versa, right?
Yes.
Like me saying something like that is what you have to put up with. But it certainly makes it easier to hear you say that, because I do just want to I just want to just roast you for it because it's the stupidest thing ever. But I know that you know, but also I know that you this is a good example of Schadenfreude where you're like, allow me to look in the mirror and be ashamed of myself in order that maybe some people will find some amusement out of it, so that at least then that's happening.
Exactly.
It's you're a very complex person, Amanda.
If not to give other people pleasure, what is my misery even for?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
I hope so you're benefit from. In this context, you are the crying clown, right?
There. Oh yeah.
Was Pagliacci? Is that the right reference? Yeah.
I have no idea. You said crying clown, and I'm like, that sounds like vaguely something I should know. And then you specified it, and I was like, maybe I should.
It's an opera reference.
Yeah, I know. I have.
Like 10 minutes. We're not even 10 minutes in. We're like 5 minutes into this episode, and I just made an opera reference.
Whoa.
And I know that it's an opera reference. I've never seen an opera in my life, but these are the things that frustrate the hell out of Crystal, is that for some reason I just have this knowledge. It's just in there.
Yeah.
It's just I walked into a room and people were having a conversation, and for some reason I remember everything that they said. Yet when she tells me that I need to do something on X day, I don't bother to remember. But she is often I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but it's a source of consternation.
I love that word.
When I
word.
Start talking about something with knowledge that makes no sense. Not that the knowledge, but it's just why do you know that?
Why do you know? Because I don't know. I feel like sometimes we're just attuned to pop culture in a way that, I was thinking about that the other day. There was something super random that I was like, how do I have this knowledge, even though it's not something that I ever would enjoy? But it's just it's just how stuff comes to me. I tried to watch Newsies, because again, I was trying to figure out all the new stuff on Disney Plus, and I know that Newsies isn't new to Disney Plus, but little mini Christian Bale is in Newsies, which is cute, and I didn't realize. But anything that was made prior to 2004 is super slow, so it was real hard. I got through 15 minutes of it, and I was like, nope. But I tried. So
there's also the Broadway musical performance of it that's on Netflix,
I know, and this is the thing,
Disney Plus as well.
Is that I had been not wanting to watch that because I was like, oh, I have to watch it in person, and then I asked my Google which came first, the musical or the movie, and it turns out the movie came first, and so I was like, well, that means I can watch the movie. So then does
the movie have songs? The movie has songs.
Yeah, the movie's a musical.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the movie is a musical. Okay.
Which I kind of like when that happens, when the movie comes first as a musical. It's, I don't know, it's just interesting.
Yeah,
you know what I couldn't find. I was trying to find the Hannah Montana movie on Disney Plus, and I couldn't find it.
Is it not there? Oh,
no.
Wow.
The Hannah Montana series is there, but I can't find the movie. And I'm like,
it's
maybe,
weird. There's weird stuff like that on Disney Plus all over the place, but I haven't seen Newsies since Newsies came out on home video.
Whoa.
Like VHS cassette tape, and I don't really remember it, but I know that I've seen it, but I don't really remember it. But I did watch this is such a random thing. This was I guess this was pretty close to the beginning of quarantine. Maybe it was even before quarantine last year. There was a morning where, for some reason, I think Cassie woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning screaming, And so at that point,
children.
she was still sleeping in our room. Like her crib was still in our room, and so I was up super early, and Crystal was up super early, and she put on Newsies, like but not the movie,
oh,
the
musical,
the Broadway one, the
wow.
musical, which actually, like, the one it's not actually, it is the Broadway musical Newsies, and it is, I think it's almost all of the original cast. I think that there's a couple of people that didn't come back for it, but it's actually a production from not that long ago in Los Angeles.
Interesting.
So all of these actors that were the appropriate ages when they were performing it on Broadway, like when, like, I think they were in like their 20s when they did the filmed version of it, are in like their 30s. So it's like you got all these like men just pretending to be teenage boys. It's interesting, but I watched most of it, and then I don't remember what happened, but it was like we moved on with our day, and I have not gone back. I have not finished the last 10 minutes of that movie. I don't know if everybody is okay. I don't know what happened to the kid with the crutches, and if they ever made it to California.
See, I didn't get that far in the movie. I didn't know that they were supposed to go to California. I like stuff that's based on real things, though, which is kind of cool. So I feel like I will maybe make my way back to Newsies, but it seemed pretty depressing. So
yeah, it's definitely a bummer. It's definitely a bummer when you're like, oh, so these kids had to work these jobs because they lived on the street. Basically, that's what it's about. It's about street kids selling newspapers
and being exploited, like it's just
being exploited, and not and union busters coming and beating the crap out of children because they didn't want them to unionize.
Yeah, so, like it's just, I don't
know. Yeah. Yeah, Newsies is not it is an uplifting story that is not at all uplifting, and just reminds you that humanity is awful.
But it's a musical with little Christian Bale, so
but they sing and they dance and they do those little kicky turn things, in the air.
Kickball change, yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah, no, I know. Yeah, with the like, so something too that's I think interesting about Newsies is that like very few community productions will put on Newsies because it's just so hard to find that large of a male cast in any community, like theater community. It's just all the girls in the.
It's okay. You just put all the girls' hair up in buns and they're wearing those little hats, and then it's fine. I wouldn't have a problem putting together a production like that. But I can see how some less enlightened individuals would have that issue.
Well, more just like is nicer for like, more diverse casting for like roles for everybody.
Yeah. But I am of the opinion that anybody should be able to play any part within certain parameters. Obviously, we don't want white people playing black characters or that sort of thing. But like but in terms of like men, women, like I don't think that we should conform to those binaries when casting theatrical productions, because I mean, like, Shakespeare didn't, for different reasons, but
very much for like
the opposite reasons. But I think that we can take some inspiration from that and make a good thing out of a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. And say, like, if you want to do a production of Romeo and Juliet where you flip the roles, or with the movie Romeo and Juliet, the Mercutio is there's some gender fluidity in that role, in that interpretation.
In which one?
And in the Leonardo DiCaprio one.
Oh, okay. I didn't.
Yeah, because I can't remember the actor's name. He was on Lost. But that plays Mercutio, and I think for like the masquerade party, he dresses as a woman, but then like in the scene after, right, in his death scene, right, the scene where he dies. Sorry, spoilers for Romeo and Juliet, where Mercutio dies. He plays into some of the dialogue and adds like this other layer to it because he's not. If I'm remembering, it's been a really long time since I've watched it.
Harold Perrineau.
Yeah, thank you. He's not fully dressed as a woman anymore, but he's still kind of like, he's got the makeup on and stuff. So there's like I can remember it being like a not controversial thing, but just like a topic of conversation when that came out. So I don't know. I would need to watch it again to really make an analysis of that. But yeah, I mean,
I have a real soft spot for this. Oh my gosh, I forgot Paul Rudd was in that movie.
Paul Rudd is in that.
Paul is in Romeo and Juliet as Dave Paris. I think he plays Paris, man.
Oh man, what? I think it's time to
rewatch. Like, dust that off.
Yeah.
I love, the only person I really remember from that movie is John Leguizamo. I even like am looking and I'm like, oh yeah, Claire Danes. But like I know that it was Claire Danes, but still it's like
John Leguizamo is Tybalt, right?
Tybalt. Yeah, Tybalt.
Yeah. Hey, in case you guys forgot, Amanda and I are huge Shakespeare nerds, and this is always the danger whenever Shakespeare gets brought up, that we will just fall down this rabbit hole yet again.
Oh yeah, Jesse Bradford is in this movie too. Oh man,
it's a fantastic movie. It's a great interpretation.
If you can keep it interesting, like I just think the thing that I love about it is that they kept it all the original dialogue, and like that. Yeah. That is like because it's just such a, I don't know. I do quite like no one else has quite done a Romeo and like no one else has quite done a Shakespeare in the same way that's made it actually like palatable, because like Much Ado About Nothing, like the Whedon Much Ado About Nothing was all right, but it could have been so much more interesting. And I love Much Ado. Much Ado is like my favorite Shakespeare play, and it just wasn't quite like it just wasn't quite. I don't know. I want to see another. I think it's time for another, like, not, they don't have to do Romeo and Juliet again. Obviously, there's so many better Shakespeare plays to choose from. But I feel like the world is ready for another edgy rework of.
You know what happened is Kenneth Branagh stopped making them.
Well, yeah.
And like that one is who directed that?
Baz Luhrmann, man.
Baz Luhrmann, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Kenneth Branagh was kind of banging that drum by himself for a while of like, I'm just gonna do all of the Shakespeare and I will star in all of them. There's the Richard III starring Ian McKellen that's really, really good as well.
Oh my gosh, there's a Romeo and Juliet starring Haley Steinfeld.
Is there? Ooh.
Wow, apparently there's a new Romeo and Juliet that just recently came out. It does look like it's modern. Does it look like it's modern? Nope, it doesn't. I thought it would. Wait, I can't tell. It's a close up of the two characters. Oh no, it's old school. Okay, it's not a.
Is there 2013 or 2014?
Yeah, 2013.
Interesting.
Ooh. Hey, how topical are we? Looks like there's an updated modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet set to premiere on April 4th, 2021. There you go. Interesting. I do love.
And who's in that? Who's involved with this?
Where's Josh O'Connor.
I don't know who that is.
Sorry, what is he from? That is something that people would know. He's in The Crown. Emma. Yeah, he plays Mr. Elton in Emma. You wouldn't know that, but that's how I know. That's how I recognize him.
You're right, I wouldn't.
He recently was in Emma as Elton, and Elton's the worst character. So I feel like it's going to be hard for me to sympathize with him in any way.
Hey, don't forget
Prince Charles. He played Prince Charles in The Crown.
On The Crown. Don't forget one of the most important interpretations of Romeo and Juliet, Nomeo and Juliet.
No, I will say.
No, we can forget that one. It's okay.
I will say the zombie one is one of my faves because it's a stealth adaptation of Romeo and
Warm
Juliet.
Bodies.
Warm Bodies. Because you don't realize until halfway through that it's Romeo and Juliet when they have a balcony scene and somebody's named Paris. And you're like, what?
Is the balcony scene, if I remember right, doesn't he like take his ear off and throw it up?
That's something, yeah, like there's something really like
there's something about like he can't hear her, and so it's like he like pops his ear off and Warm Bodies is a great movie. That's a very good movie.
Very much.
Listen, we were gonna focus tonight.
Well, we can't fully focus, otherwise it wouldn't be a Thunderquack podcast, but we can.
This is true.
Now we
really need to. We don't. I want to say that we need to. Man, there are a lot of productions of Romeo and Juliet on IMDb. I want to say that we really need to just do like a Shakespeare episode, but I also don't want to, because when we try and do that, when we try and focus our energies on something like that, it always ends up feeling forced and doesn't work. Yeah. And it's always so much better when we just like
talk about Shakespeare in the middle of a Lois and Clark podcast.
Essentially procrastinate the actual topic by talking about this other thing. I want to watch this Haley Steinfeld production.
You know who would have done great superhero movies is Shakespeare. Like he was lowest common denominator enough and epic enough that he would have totally been a rad comic book like movie writer.
The MCU is the modern Shakespeare, and I'm
on board with that.
And I think that Star Wars was the Shakespeare of the 70s and 80s. And it's like these things they transcend their medium and become part of culture are that like that's what Shakespeare did, right? Like, and whether or not like it's people, you get into conversations about Shakespeare and it always becomes like well, you know, he probably didn't even write all of those. He was like stealing them from other people, and I was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because Kevin Feige didn't write all of the MCU movies,
right?
But history will not look back and go like, oh man, Scott Derrickson, who directed Doctor Strange, right? Like no one's people don't even remember that he directed Doctor Strange. Now
I've never heard the name Scott Derrickson before.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
I've never paid attention,
exactly.
So.
But you know exactly who Kevin Feige is, because he's the master storyteller behind all of it. And I imagine that Shakespeare was the same guy.
Similar.
He was the same guy when he was alive, where it was like, did he write Romeo and Juliet as well as Hamlet, as well as Richard III, as well as Much Ado About Nothing? Like maybe he did. Maybe one guy wrote all that stuff. And that would be incredible. But is it more likely that he was just a really, really great producer? I think that's probably a lot more likely.
Interesting. I'm pulling it all together.
And his name gets attributed to all of these different things because that's how history remembers it. And we know that history is not a reliable narrator.
I will say I am now like scrolling through this, realizing that the early 2000s was when they decided to do a lot of Shakespeare movies. Like came out as well, and I remember that one because I was like I think Julia Stiles was in that one, and then but then I like went down this thing and I was like, oh, like the actual like Kenneth Branagh Othello is Lawrence Fishburne, which is rad. I don't know. I don't like Othello or Hamlet.
Is that the one with Keanu Reeves in it?
No, Keanu Reeves is in The Much Ado About Nothing.
But that's the Kenneth Branagh one, right?
The Kenneth Branagh Much Ado About Nothing. Keanu Reeves is in.
He is very pretty in that movie.
That's such a fun, because Keanu Reeves is in that one, and that's the one with the guy that plays the idiot with the horse.
The idiot with the horse.
Beetlejuice. The role in Much Ado is like he makes the guy come after him with the
Michael
horse.
Keaton.
Yeah,
Michael Keaton.
Yeah, I'm saying Michael Keaton is the word I was looking
like
for.
if but without context, the idiot with the horse, Beetlejuice. I'm like, there's no horse in Beetlejuice.
They were two separate thoughts.
There was a comma in there. Actually, not even a comma. That was a semicolon.
There was a completely separate
Yeah.
One was about the character that he played, and the other was about a different character that he played. Sorry.
Yeah, Shakespeare is cool. We like Shakespeare. Let's talk about Lois, Superman and Lois. I keep wanting to call it Lois and Clark. You just did a minute ago.
Oh shoot. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's so hard not to. I don't understand why they needed to call it Superman and Lois. They should have just called it Superman. Like, there's never been actually, that's not true. The George Reeves Superman TV show was Superman, but that was like serialized. Like, that was back in the day.
Well, they wanted it to have a female in the title because there aren't very many females in the titles of many of these Marvel or DC TV series. So
yeah, I get that. It's also like, it feels like that though. Every time you have to say Superman and Lois, it's like, oh man, like it feels really, really forced. That said, like I get it, because the show is not about him being Superman. It is not. We're gonna
Which
get
was
into
unexpected and lovely. I really did not pay attention to what was happening with this show before I started watching it, and like was vaguely aware that they had kids in Supergirl. That there was that plot about her.
Okay, here, hold on 1 second, because I just want to let everybody know this is going to be full spoilers for the first episode. Right. So if you haven't watched it yet and you're planning on watching it, like walk away now and come back after you've watched it. It's 90 minutes, so it is a little bit of an investment. But
wait, did I not watch the whole thing then? I definitely only watched 60 minutes of content.
I don't know. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't.
Started and ended. No, I feel like I watched the whole thing. Maybe I just imagined it being 60 minutes.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer. It's a little bit longer. But go watch it. Come back. I will tell you right now that I think we both loved it. Right? Is that fair to say?
I mean, I dislike very few things that are Superman.
Okay, so Amanda does not have discriminating taste when it comes to this subject matter. I don't. But I if I didn't like it, I would let you guys know. Yeah. I hope that everybody trusts me on that at this point. But yeah, go watch it. And now we are gonna get into it. Yeah, it is not about him being Superman. It's about him being a dad, right? And it's Smallville 2.0. Is the other component of it, which is about the boys, right?
Which is such a great, like, let's take all of the nostalgia that we loved from the Smallville series, but already have the best parts of Superman, which is him and his relationship with Lois and him being Superman, and find a way to combine the two things that we have said as an audience that we want over the past 10 years, and then make it into a series is rad. Like, I'm here for this. Like, I'm excited for this series.
There are two things about this series that get me so excited. The first is that we are not covering it. Which we kind of talked about a little bit on, I think, on Twitter or whatever. But back in the day on Quiver, Amanda and I definitely said if they ever did a Superman show in the CW Arrowverse, that we would most likely pivot and cover that instead of covering Arrow. Now, Arrow ended and we walked away into the sunset, never looking back. The lesson that I think we learned on Quiver is that when this is true of, and I think this happened when we started doing the crossovers, right? With everybody, the crossover podcast with the rest of the DC TV podcast community. Is that everybody hates the show that they cover.
Oh yeah.
Or at least they talk like they do. And everybody is jealous of everybody else for covering these other shows. Except Arrow. No one was jealous of us. But it was always like, oh man, I wish I was covering Legends of Tomorrow. That show's actually fun. Oh man, I wish I was covering The Flash. They get to do cool stuff on that one. Right? Like that was sort of the attitude for everything. And so it made me sort of reflect on all of the podcasting that I do and like reflect on Star Wars and Arrow and everything else and think about like, man, it does kind of when you have to be critical about it, I don't think I enjoyed Star Wars Resistance as much as I would have if I was just watching it for fun, as opposed to I got to watch this because I have to do a podcast, right? So like with that, like I could have not skipped an episode, but like let a couple pile up and then watch them in succession, as opposed to having to watch it every week as soon as it aired, so that I didn't get spoiled, so that I could have the proper mindset to review it later, right? Like, right. And then having to do recaps of episodes of a television show that I don't particularly enjoy. Right. Like it's sort of like if you witnessed a horrific car accident and then a couple days later or like the next day someone was like, yeah, I'm gonna need you to talk about that car accident for like an hour. Is that cool? Like just kind of talk
Not
about what
every
you saw.
episode of Arrow was a car accident.
No, but just like that feeling of like, I don't want to go back and relive this. And yet I have to not only relive this, I have to dissect it. Like,
yeah, it's so much nicer to just get to enjoy stuff and to have this podcast where we can then talk about the stuff that we really, really want to. Like, yeah. I'm also thoroughly enjoying watching WandaVision, which I'm like genuinely watching that every Friday when it comes out. I never watched Arrow, like, except when we would podcast like right after, where I would like watch it on the day that it was due. Otherwise, I would like wait till the very last minute to like watch Arrow because I just wasn't like excited to watch it. But I'm totally excited, and we still get to podcast about WandaVision on this when we feel like it. I think we're gonna do that next week, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, so next week won't be a regular episode of Thunderquack. Next week will be our first episode of the Thunderquack podcast, Enough Said, which is our MCU recap show. So
I have nothing to do with naming, just so everybody knows.
Yeah.
Mike just gets to name stuff whatever he wants. It's his own little world.
It's my job.
It's that.
Did you have a name suggestion for our MCU podcast?
I mean, if I had a time to think about it and cared. No.
Yeah, so you don't.
I appreciate you for just bringing me along for the ride, but I do feel the need to every once in a while praise you for doing it all yourself.
So yeah, we haven't really talked about WandaVision because we have been saving it. And we're gonna myself, Amanda, and Curtis are all gonna come together and do sort of like a deep dive episode, very like dedicated. So it's sort of a podcast within a podcast. It'll be in this podcast feed, so you don't have to subscribe to anything else. But it won't be the format of Thunderquack, which is no format whatsoever, right? It'll actually have a bit of a format, and we'll have a little bit of a game plan going into it. So, but that'll be next week, and we're gonna talk about the whole series, obviously, as if it were a movie. It'll be a little bit of like a review / recap of it as one holistic story. Which I think is a better way to talk about it, because week to week, it just becomes about speculation. It just becomes about what's going to happen next, and trying to decode all of these hints and Easter eggs and stuff. And that's fun. Like, I love that. And there's a bunch of podcasts that I listen to right now that do that. What the Fiction is one of my favorites right now, that's doing that. But we don't need to. I don't think it's worthwhile for us to do that. I think that for us, it's better to give it the whole view and talk about it. So that's what we're gonna do. But
in the meantime, we're gonna talk about Superman and Lois right away because we wanted to.
Yeah, well, because this is kind of first impressions, right? And it's a 17 episode season, so it'll be a little bit of a bigger thing, and we'll probably pop in from time to time and talk about the show as it goes on. But I think the point of this conversation right now, I think for me, is to just be happy that finally someone is telling a Superman story, A, worth telling, and B, that gets it right. And I mean, there's a little bit of controversy around this series, and we'll get into that in a minute. But in terms of like what's presented on screen, if that's all you knew about, as a Superman fan, I think you can't help but be ecstatic about this series right from the get-go. I mean, like within that first couple of minutes with his like introduction with the narration, and then seeing him recreate the Action Comics #1. What, it's not #1, but the Action, or is it #1? Maybe it is. The Action Comics cover, this first Superman's first appearance with the holding up the green car, right?
Yeah.
And he's in the, now here's the thing, he's not in his comic first appearance costume. The costume he's wearing is the Fleischer Superman costume mixed with his first appearance costume, because the first appearance is different. It's got like it's much more of like a shield, like it's kind of got like the little corners cut out of it, if I'm recalling correctly. Let me look at Action Comics #1.
I was gonna say I can't recall this kind of information, so it
But
it might be using
it's the costume that he's wearing. Yeah, I'm right. The costume that he's wearing is much more inspired by the Fleischer Superman cartoons from the 1940s, which makes me incredibly happy, because that's the Superman that I feel like I was first introduced to, was in those cartoons. We had I've talked about this before on other podcasts, but we had a VHS with all of the Fleischer cartoons on it, and I used to watch that all the time. And that's like the mysterious stranger from another world. Like it start like that whole intro and everything, and the music, like to me that is sense memory Superman. The second that I hear that, like I just feel everything that I've ever felt about Superman, and it's why that character is like ingrained in who I am as a person, is because of those formative experiences as a kid.
Wow.
And like that goes on to Lois and Clark, watching that with my parents, like sort of as a family thing. And
I think I just watched it by myself, like a sad little sad little human.
That's a bummer.
I don't think anybody liked it as much as I did, but
and then the Batman animated series going into the Superman realm, Superman animated series, Justice League. My mom still asserting that Jerry O'Connell is Superman at some point, and I'm always like, what? He never played Superman.
Where?
My mom, I don't know if it's a joke, like if it's a gag, or if she genuinely thinks that Jerry O'Connell played Superman at some point. But when we used to watch the TV show Crossing Jordan, which linking back to WandaVision, Catherine Hahn was on that. That was the first time I saw Catherine Hahn on anything, and was like, she's great, and was right all the way back then in whatever 1990 something year that was. But yeah, we would be watching. I used to watch that show with my mom. I was a super cool kid as a teenager. Watching procedural series with my mom. I
watched so much TV with my parents. I feel like
well, there's a reason why we're friends. And she'd be like, oh, there's Superman, and I'd be like, he's never been Superman. He's not Superman. Now, that said, Jerry O'Connell at a certain point in his career would have made a fantastic Superman.
I love Sliders. That was one of my, I remember very few things well. I just have a bad memory. But I have a visceral memory of the episode of Sliders where they made it back home, and they only have like a minute to decide whether they stay there forever or they leave. And so he decides to test the gate that has always squeaked at his house, and it doesn't squeak. And he's like, okay, this obviously isn't our home. We'll continue on our like endless journey. And then the mom comes out and is like, I'm so glad we got that gate fixed. And you're like, no, he made it home and then didn't. I just have this very visceral memory of one episode of Sliders.
Now, okay, so I assert, somebody said on a Facebook group the other day, because Sliders came up. This was like last week or the week before. I am almost positive that is the pilot.
Really?
Like that's the first episode, that because the first episode they test it, they get sucked into the thing, they go to whatever the world is that what's the character, is it Remy, is that the guy?
Again,
the black guy,
I remember
right?
one thing about sliders, and it's very specifically everything I just explained to you.
So I'm pretty sure that like they go through their whole thing with that first episode, and at the end of the episode they go back. Yeah, Rembrandt, it was his name, and they called him Remy. But they go back, or they go back through the portal or whatever, and then he tests the gate or whatever, and then they're like, oh, I guess it's not, and then they go, and then the mom comes out with the guy, and she's like, oh, thanks for fixing the gate.
But like my big thing is that I feel like it's been a while since he left, so that's why I don't think it's the pilot.
No,
it's because it's been a while, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm still missing our son or whatever it is. Like I feel like it's like I definitely, again, I don't remember much about this, but the viscerality of it for me is that it's like after a few episodes of them going through and they finally did solve the problem.
Yeah.
They were able to get back, but then they just...
Okay, here it is. In Into the Mystic, they encounter Quinn's double, who is able to send them home. On their arrival, they learn that they only have seconds to decide if this is in fact home. The decision rests on a squeaky gate. When it doesn't squeak, the sliders believe that they have not found their home and slide away.
And that's the pilot?
So Into the Mystic, no, it's not.
Okay, good. Oh, but this is the...
Season 2, Episode 1.
Yeah, so
it's the first episode of Season 2.
Yeah.
We're so focused on Superman and Lois, it's unbelievable.
I'm so sorry. We started talking about Jerry O'Connell, and I just have very specific memories of Jerry.
Hey, look, we can do a whole episode on Jerry O'Connell at some point too, because Jerry O'Connell is just fantastic. But yeah, Superman and Lois. It just the showing him in that costume, that very like early style Superman costume, and having that moment of which the line I think is originally from, maybe it's from Superman the Animated Series, I can't remember, but it's also in one of the comics. I think maybe Superman for All Seasons. Thanks, my mom made it for me. Is like that's such a perfect. Here we go. My mom made it for me. Know your meme.
That was very cute.
We're doing a lot of Googling on this episode.
I do.
It's in Superman for All Seasons. Where he's like, this kid is like playing on a ledge and almost falls off, and Superman saves the kid and then gives him back his hat, and he's like, wow, cool costume, and he goes, thanks, my mom made it for me, and then flies off. The kid's still on this side of this building because kids in Metropolis play on the sides of buildings,
of course.
But it's such a great Superman moment.
I love so it. It is, I will say, the thing that's like the greatest about it is like finding the right Superman. And I do think that there's just so many like little things about the Superman that I love. I didn't know, and again, I don't know that much about what he was like on Supergirl because I didn't watch all of the stuff that he was in. But I like the idea that him and Sam Lane are like colleagues. And that there's a certain amount of gruffness. Like, I don't know if that was something that carries on, if that's just new to the Superman and Lois series, or if that's something that carried over from. But I like the idea that after a certain amount of time in their relationship, because this is something that doesn't really ever get explored in any of the Superman stuff the content that I've watched, is that like when you're married to somebody for, however many years.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but that his family, it's very much like Sam Lane to be like, this is Lois's fault. She married you, so therefore you should continue to be Superman. Like, I love that. It's so in character. And so one of the things I really like about all of this is that they're choosing the right kinds of characters. And like the kid casting was so well done, but also, from the moment that you see the kid, you're kind of like, oh, he's the one with powers. Like,
well, I mean,
like,
it's definitely a telegraphed bait and switch, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. But in the best,
they
in a
lean
way
into
that,
it so hard with the one son.
yeah, but it's like
Let me get their names here.
It makes it like kind of good because you're like, it's not like it's an ongoing. It's not like they didn't reveal it in the first episode, so it's like fine, you'll give it to them.
Yeah,
but
their names are Jordan Kent and Jonathan Kent. Now, Jonathan Kent, that's easy to decipher. He's obviously named after Superman's dad, right?
Yes.
After Clark Kent's dad. Jordan Kent. Do you know why he's named Jordan?
No.
Because he's named after Jor-El,
Oh,
Superman's other dad.
Hey!
Yeah.
Of course. Oh,
yeah.
Cute! I love it.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. So they lean into it that like, oh, Jonathan, he's on the football team. He's the quarterback in his freshman year or something like that.
Yeah.
Which it's one of the important things there is to establish that they are apparently 14 years old.
Yeah.
These kids do not look 14 years old.
Well, I mean, come on though. If we look at the first episode of Smallville,
TV 14, yeah, for
like
sure.
you know, the TV 14.
Yeah. But so we get that, and then you know, we get this stuff that that Jordan is he has social anxiety disorder, and he's more troubled.
But it's like, how do you not know immediately it's because he has thoughts that he's an alien? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that it's quite that fine a point on it. I don't think that he realizes any of that until
but it's like,
later
he's just messed up.
Yeah. Like, but yeah, I mean, like, it's obvious, and they are also setting up a Clark and Lex, Superman and Lex, like aspect with these brothers.
Yeah.
If that's not where this goes, I will be very, very surprised.
Oh yeah,
and disappointed, because that's got to be what it is.
So this is what I wanted to talk to you about, because this is something that if they telegraph it, like, again, it's one of these things, you know how we kept watching Arrow and in the first episode we're like, are they doing it on purpose or are they not doing it on purpose? And it's like, I think the more interesting choice with those brothers is to lean into and continue to keep Jonathan the good brother, and to deal with, how do you deal with a brother that has powers that then becomes rogue? So if you're like
oh yeah, 100%,
like that is such a more interesting choice. But because it's but it's like, it becomes also like, I don't know, it just becomes, I feel like that's where they're going. But it's also, it seems too obvious that they're going to make Jordan into a bad person. Like, I don't know. Like, I just
I don't think that that's the way that it'll go at all. I mean, I do think
that it'll be Jonathan that'll get pushed away, and he'll, because he's starting off as such a the good son, and it's like, how do you like lean against like a god or whatever?
If you really look at it, if you really look at their behavior in this first episode, and we're reading a lot into a little at the moment.
But what else would we do on this podcast, Mike?
But if you really look into their behavior and you see that Jonathan is motivated by ego, and Jordan is introspective, right? And those two things are going to now. This is the best part of a Superman story. Either one of those personality traits could lead to Lex Luthor.
Right.
Either one of those personality traits could lead to Superman. Like because there is a huge amount of ego with Superman. There has to be, right?
Right.
It's wrestling with that ego of, and which is exactly what Superman in this story is doing, of like, I have the ability to save the world,
right,
but I can't save my own family, right? Like,
right, yeah.
There's a lot of ego in that statement. Yeah. And his relationship with Sam Lane in this incarnation is the I mean, Sam Lane is the personification of that thought, that Superman is a weapon to defend the Earth.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because General Lane does not care about the man Clark Kent for 1 second.
Yeah.
He sees Superman as a tool, as a means to an end, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where some conflict is going to come from in this story. It already has in the first episode, but even more so. Like I think it's really. When you see the preview for the second episode, it's already going in that direction, and him saying things like, "Look, when you married Superman, this is what you agreed to," like that sort of thing. It was like he is definitely at this point the adversary to Lois, but there will be a turn. There will be a point at which he becomes an enemy to Clark as well. They're working together right now, but that can't last. There's no way that the dynamic with those two characters is sort of preordained. It's destined. It's one of those things where it's like eventually he's going to it'll turn out that General Lane has some sort of a weapon in order to fight Kryptonians that Superman does not know about and would not agree with.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're going to need it in order to fight whoever this guy is that's trying to kill Superman. So there's going to be like this conflict of, why do you have this? Well, it's a good thing that I have it. And it's like, yeah, well, we're going to use it, but then we're going to have a conversation about this.
Of course.
The scene writes itself, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just the way that these stories are told. I see that, but there's also like that introspective component of Superman of like, with all of this power, like I have to be responsible. I have to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. Like there's a compulsion to do the right thing because of the power, because he thinks about it, right? And that's sort of like, that's the balance of that character. I am very happy to know that is on the minds of the writers, like that's very clear. It comes across loud and clear in this series that's what it's about. It's about what, like, how do you balance doing good with being good, and
right, and like where your like loyalties lie, and like how you, and like that you can fail at something and be good at something else. And I don't know, it just seems like, and I'm just kind of like, I wonder if it's like the idea of like the setting up the two brothers, there's really no other story aside from them like becoming adversaries.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of like, but it really is, I think the interesting thing is to do the triple switch, where it's like, you think that Jordan is going to follow in his father's footsteps to become Superman, and that the other brother will like go, right? But you're like, you set it up where you're like, oh, what's Jordan going to do to these powers? Because he's so sulky and moody and not the one to like live up to them. Is he going to live up to them, or is he not? I just like the idea that maybe he won't. Like, maybe he'll be like, how do you fight your own son too? Right? Like when you don't have, like when you have like, it's, I don't know, that you release something to the world. I have no idea. That's probably not the best choice. It's probably not where they're going, but I still think
I mean, I could see it. I could see it getting there. I don't think it's going to get there in season 1 or 2, but if this show goes on for 10 seasons, it'll get there. Yeah. Like, that's fair. We had to. There are a lot of stories we had to tell on Smallville in order to get 10 seasons out of that show.
I mean,
there's a whole season with Doomsday.
Oh yeah, there's a whole season with Lana and Lex being married. Ugh,
exactly.
Gross.
And her having a real pretend baby, that's still unclear to me.
Yeah. It was
whatever happened with that baby?
It wasn't a real baby.
It wasn't a real baby.
It was a fake baby.
But it did exist because didn't he do an experiment with it or something?
No, I don't think it ever existed. I don't know. Let's not.
It's been so long since I've watched season 6.
Smallville door. Yeah. Can I just say how frustrating I am that Lana's husband is so clichéingly villainous? Like, it's like you can't even like pretend. Like, it's like, why do you have to make him so unlikable? Like, just the moments where it's like, does he have to be so disparaging to like his comment about like, oh, women in the house, blah, blah. Like, it's like, really, you can't make like I don't like Lana's character. Why? You're making Lana's character worse. by having that guy. It's like, who in their right mind? It also brings Superman down. Like, she dated him in the past. Like, he felt like she was a good partner to have at one point in time. What the heck is her, like...
I think we have a lot of story left to tell.
There's so much. But it just also is like...
Yeah.
It's so obvious, which is maybe a good place to shift and pivot into more negative things. We'll cover them really quickly and then go back into all the love. But can we just, like, I want to talk about the Black Lives Matter thing a little bit, and to do that, we can't avoid the Nadira Tucker comments about Superman and Lois, because now that you've shared this article with me, just about the former, like, producer and writer, I guess, that was, like, released from her contract. I'm using air quotes, as a producer and a writer from Superman and Lois. Some of the stuff that she's commenting on, where she's like, she feels like parts of the reasons was because she would be bringing up that there was, like, a lot of Me Too moments, like flagging them in the dialogue, like for jokes in the dialogue, and like making sure that it was passing the Bechdel test, and all of these things that are really, like, good, that should be done. And now I can't help but look back on the episode with that lens and be like, oh yeah, there sure were a lot of moments where you're like, was it really super necessary for him to have a super sexist joke about his family? Like, there's maybe better ways for him. Like, it does, I don't know. So again, being like, what is it that, like, that writers are like, or that show creators are wanting to put in their series and how they move it forward? And it's like, maybe there are choices that you can make that are stronger. And like, maybe, the motivation for Powers to come out was protecting a woman that you kissed without consent, and then you got beat up with because the only thing that would start a fight around a bonfire is a pretty girl. Like, I can totally see it now. And this is totally what our after credits, like, conversation is about, is like, how do you go into stuff and you separate, like, the art that you love from the like controversy, or from the things that are important about it. And it's just like, we can still really love the Superman and Lois pilot, but it does help to sort of deconstruct it a little bit and be like, would it have made it any, like, better to maybe just find different ways of getting there narratively that didn't require using women as props in so many ways, right? And I don't know what you think about that, but I just, after I read, like, literally, Mike just shared this article with me right before we started podcasting, so I haven't really had time to deconstruct it. I'm deconstructing it while I'm talking to you about the episode. And so those are just my initial thoughts on that, where I do look back on the pilot and I'm kind of like, really, did it pass the Bechdel test? Like, I can't even... Like now going backwards and being like, it shouldn't be that hard. Like, add some more female characters into your, like, I don't know. There's just a few.
I think a pilot is hard to judge on alone. Because, like, we're establishing this world and these characters that, when you really break it down, there aren't a lot of characters in this first episode for a series. Right? Like, obviously in the next episode we're going to get introduced to a larger world. This is sort of our first step into it. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't pass the Bechdel test. I don't necessarily look at the Bechdel test as, like, the be all end all, and I don't think that
people that talk about it don't. It's not the be all end all, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, but I just always have to say that whenever it gets brought up, because I want people to know that, like, that's sort of the context that we're talking about this in, is that, like, it is one of many things to measure by, because you can certainly have feminist stories without passing the Bechdel test. It's not
but it's also a bare minimum. It should not take much to pass the Bechdel test.
It shouldn't. Like, it shouldn't. Yeah. I think I can see the show getting there eventually, but it does need to introduce a few more characters. We do need a larger world for these people to live in. I think this stuff is unavoidable. I think that I kind of made the joke to you when we started recording tonight of, like, you know, it's at every level of every production, and that's kind of due to the fact that men are just awful. Like, white men are terrible. I say that as a white man. Like, it's just a cisgendered heterosexual white men have decided that the rest of the world conforms to their worldview, and that means that this other stuff doesn't get thought about
as
and
much. It's just, yeah, it's not as prominent.
yeah, like the studio system is built to support the assertion that I just made, and the power system in our society in the West is definitely built on these ideas. And so we are now in the era that we're living through. Like, these are the growing pains of dismantling that system. And I think that there's a little bit of impatience on the part of our generation, and certainly the generations coming after us, to just get past this, right? Because we're, and I'm speaking in very broad, very general terms, but as a generation, like, we're aware, right? We're, to use the nomenclature, we're woke, right? and so it's very difficult, I think, to live in the midst of that change, especially because we are a generation that comes after the civil rights movement, right? Like, we're even really after uh uh gay rights and that sort of stuff, like had its massive shift in the 80s. So we've grown up in a world, not a perfect world obviously by any stretch, but we've grown up in a world where there is a conversation about these things, and it's mostly, I want to say, positive. That's my perspective.
Well, it's good that it's happening, for sure.
Yeah, that like, we grew up with episodes of Boy Meets World that talked about racism. Right, like,
at least, yeah, as
like
opposed to, yeah,
like we grew up with TV shows that addressed these issues, as opposed to the generations before us that didn't have those things, right? So I think, like, we look at that and we want to be better than we are, and so something like this comes out, and I think that there's like a knee-jerk reaction from some groups of, like, well, then boycott the show, right? And it's like, well, I I think that we have to have this conversation. I think that we need to talk about what's happening with the CW and with these shows. I mean, like, look, put all the posters up. There's one thing that 90% of these shows have in common, and it's white people front and center on all of these shows. Every story is a white story, with the exception of the ones that are very clearly there for the sake of representation. And that doesn't make Black Lightning a bad show, but it does sort of raise a red flag about the way that the CW thinks about this stuff, because they don't think of inclusion and diversity as something that needs to be in all of the shows. They think that they can have Black Lightning, which is a show about Black characters from a Black perspective, and then we did it. Check the box, like you just said. Black Lightning is canceled, by the way. This is its last season, which I think is what, its third. So it really didn't get as much of a chance as something like Arrow, which, like, let's point out the great big white elephant in the room. Arrow was a garbage show for most of its run. It wasn't great. It wasn't. Like, it didn't justify its existence past season 3, right? And sure, we got to good stuff. Season 5 was a lot of fun. We really liked it, right? Prometheus and
that was good,
and all
good
that
times,
stuff. Like there are highlights in those later seasons, and we were along for the ride, for better or worse. Did that show need to exist past season 2? No, it didn't. It didn't, and it wore out its welcome. And a lot of people dropped off, and it kind of became the running joke of, like, wow, this show is still on, no one's watching it. and people being like, oh man, I guess I got to get caught up on Arrow in order to watch this crossover. And I was like, no, you really don't. Like just go read a wiki, because you don't need to watch all these episodes.
Yeah.
But and why? Because Stephen Amell looks good on a poster. Honestly, like that's why. And that's not Stephen Amell's fault. Like I'm not pointing at
but
him.
Also, I will say though, I feel like there was some people watching it. Like there's certain amount of like planned content that hits a denomination where it goes sort of like out there into the universe, and I don't know. I will. So talking specifically though about what you're like, just to lean into that conversation before we completely depart from it. The stuff in Vancouver, we are very privileged to have a very busy industry right now. I think it has to do with, like, we're taking COVID so seriously, and there's a lot of stuff in place, but we're able to open back up in other ways that other parts of the industry are not able to. And it is such a bit. We are shooting so many shows here, and a lot of stuff from the CW got picked up again, which means there's work for another year for lots of people. Anyways, there's been a big controversy recently with one of the smaller productions. So it's not an ongoing series, but it's just like a one-off like TV, like true crime thing that's being shot here. And a crew member on set was wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, and somebody in production decided that it was okay for them to approach that person and tell them that what they were wearing was inappropriate because it was too political, and ask them to remove it. This obviously, there's lots of articles if people want to look up like the details of what's going on. There's since been apologies and all sorts of stuff, but at the end of the day, this person obviously didn't feel safe on a set like that, where they're being told that the things that they value are considered controversial, and when it's not a political statement, right? So I guess it is a political statement, but it's in no way something that is offensive or is in any way there's nothing that's mandated in in what they wear, as long as they're being safe in the garb that they are wearing. So anyways, there's been a whole backlash in the Vancouver community, obviously in support of people standing up for their own beliefs, for things that matter, and especially for the Black Lives Matter movement, and raising that flag about the lack of diversity in many of the on-screen things that are shot here. There was a call for everybody to wear their Black Lives Matter apparel to set today. So it's stuff that is not without consequence. And the greatest part about it is that production details are available to anybody who wants to see them, and they were all over my Facebook, where people were naming the person and with their phone number and being like, call this person, tell them it's not okay. It was great. And to see that sort of outcry from the community being like, this is not okay, how do we stand up for this? And all of the actual organizations in Vancouver, like the UBCP, so the Actors Union, and the IATSE, I think IATSE did something as well, but the unions actually being like, this is also not okay. A lot of the actors on set, when they got wind of what had happened with the crew member, in solidarity, they were reaching out to their agents being like, hey, I don't feel comfortable on a show that doesn't value diversity. And it was really inspiring to see it, and that they couldn't get away with not addressing it. And so which is awesome. And I will say, shout out too, I didn't watch the Golden Globes, much of them. I turned on a little bit of them, but Tina Fey and Amy Poehler straight up called out the Hollywood Foreign Press Association for not having any Black members. And it just is there is, and it's that's the Golden Globes is a Hollywood Foreign Press event. That is what it is. And they stood up there and said, this is not okay, do better. And the more people say that, the more hopefully it sinks in. And when it comes back again to Superman and Lois, we can't dismiss that important part of the conversation, that a Black female producer and writer was let go from a show, from talking about how important it is to continue to have diversity make it into the stories that they're telling. Yeah. And so it's just a flag. It's a flag that we have to be aware of when we're talking about the project.
I think with the CW, it's a pattern, right? Because you go back to the Flash, and you look at the way that the character of Iris West was portrayed, or is being portrayed, and now finally, I guess in season 6, the one that's airing now, or starting soon. Candace Patton can finally have natural hair. Like she doesn't have to have like straightened Hollywood hair. Which is these are conversations that have to happen. It's difficult, I think, for a couple of white people to have them, but it is like, we can't just talk about this show about Superman and Lois and skate past this stuff without bringing it up, because I think it is important to contextualize the environment that this media is created in, because if we don't have a conversation about it, nothing changes. And I don't want it to be like this for people of color and I LGBTQ and like all of like these marginalized groups that have been fighting so hard just to get the same representation that someone like me is lucky enough to just accidentally stumble into constantly. I make the joke all the time. It's like I am the default character creator setting when you're playing a video game with like character creation. Like you set it to male and it's just like, yeah, it's a white guy with brown hair, glasses, beard, medium build ish, like like it's just like I couldn't be more what Hollywood and Western society considers like the default. And it's kind of gross that exists, like that thought process exists, that it's like, oh, there's an average human being and that average human being looks like a very specific person, because it's not representative of the world that we live in, and so it's just a matter of telling the CW that they have to do better, that they can't sideline these characters when it gets difficult, that they have to listen to these actors, and for my money, any good production integrates the actor into the character after a certain amount of time. Like when you really look at it and look at shows that run for a long time, aspects of the performer end up baked into the character. It's a little bit harder, I think, to do with something like comic books because they're established characters, but also I do think that we're finally getting to the point with comic book storytelling that people realize, even the general audience is beginning to understand multiverse theory and the idea that this is one version of the story,
right?
That we can have. I mean, they've announced a new Superman movie coming, that's in production, that unfortunately J.J. Abrams is producing. I say that because like I don't want him to do to Superman what has happened to some other stuff, but
you could get one of the gold J.J. Abrams. There's nuggets in there sometimes.
He's really good on the first try. He's really good at the first at bat. He doesn't know how to stick the landing.
Let him do it once and then walk away.
Now again, this happened when we talked about him before. Ta-Nehisi Coates is the screenwriter for this new Superman project. The rumor is that it's going to be a black Superman. And we just talked last week about a Latino Supergirl, right? Like we're getting to a place where these characters can be more than they are on the page. Like they can be reinterpreted in this way, which I'm ecstatic about personally. Like that's my perspective on it. I think that's great because like, let's open this stuff up. But back when there was the campaign for Donald Glover to be Spider-Man before Andrew Garfield got cast, right? There was like the whole thing of like make Spider-Man black, and there was no reason that you couldn't. And in fact, in my opinion, you actually open up this whole other avenue with that character to re-explore the stuff that Stan Lee was exploring with that character when he was created, right? About being an everyman, poverty versus, you know, the haves and the have-nots sort of thing. Like there was all this stuff that they could have explored, and obviously Marvel finally figured that out, and they created Miles Morales out of that whole thing. And now Miles Morales is the star of his own franchise of Spider-Man movies that are arguably the best Spider-Man movies. Like we haven't seen the second one yet, but that first one, Into the Spider-Verse, is the best Spider-Man movie. And it's about a black Spider-Man. So and the core central message of that movie is anyone can wear the mask, right?
Right, yeah.
So I think the CW has some catching up to do. But I think
why is it that we always compare it to Marvel? Where we're like, look at what Marvel's doing over here.
Yeah, but that's Sony Marvel. So like let's put it into perspective. It's Sony Marvel, who's usually wrong. They usually do the bad thing.
Yeah.
Somehow they managed to make Venom into a good movie, but Morbius I don't have high hopes for. Black Cat and what I think it's supposed to be Black Cat and Sable is one of the other movies that they're supposed to be making, and it's like nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Anyways, I think that you like it's a paradox, it's a contradiction, because you have to look at it and you have to go like the CW as a studio, as a network, really, they make some questionable choices and some problematic choices. But then the individual productions that they greenlight often contain within them some very progressive writers and producers, right? And so we get some really great stuff. I mean, like going back to the first 2 seasons of Arrow, the first season in particular, like that the first season of Arrow had a lot of diversity for a CW show, particularly in 2012, right?
Right. Oh wow, that was so long ago.
I mean, like Janina Gavankar was the first love interest introduced on that show. I don't remember her character's name, but she was the cop, right? The detective that he dated for a little bit, and then she left the show. I mean, like that. You had your white male lead dating an Indian actress, right? Like an Indian character. So I should say South Asian, because I don't know that they ever specified on the show, but like there are progressive things that have happened, and we have had some really great steps forward on the CW stuff that should be celebrated, like our first on screen, I think our first on screen trans superhero on Supergirl, right?
I think so, yeah.
Like cool stuff has happened. So this is for me like the not throwing the baby out with the bathwater part of the conversation, where it's like, right, I don't want to judge Superman and Lois as a whole on this one thing. I do want to judge this one thing about it, right? Like the way in which Nadria Tucker was dismissed is problematic and requires a conversation at the least, and preferably an investigation in the same aspect of what's happening with Justice League and Joss Whedon and the producers of that, and talking about like an independent third party needs to come in and needs to find out what is the problem here that led to this outcome, so that this can't happen again. I don't know that we're going to get that from the CW, and that's disappointing, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it like it should happen. So I don't know. I think we can kind of veer back towards talking about the actual show, and less about the production, but that's sort of my takeaway from it. That was a lot. I hope we made
there's a lot, so we're gonna
something resembling a point.
We'll sandwich it with some more fun things. I'd love to know what you loved the most about the pilot, because I feel like it just to end on something fun.
Yeah,
for like what it was.
I mean, I think that the easy answer is what I talked about already. That one moment with Superman.
Right.
but I think if that moment were in it and that was it, then I don't think I would be as excited about this show as I am. It's the fact that like they opened with that, but they followed through um with this characterization of Superman as a father. Uh and obviously me being where I am at in my life, like
right.
I already said it, the Hollywood caters to me. Right?
Yeah.
And here I am with a 4.5-year-old and an 18-month-old, and the Hollywood gods have decided that now is the best time to tell a story about Superman being a dad.
Right.
Like this didn't happen before for some reason. I mean, like there have been other stories about Superman being a dad, but the fact that they've kind of like doubled down on it in this way, and that it's really the focus of his story in the show, it's like what's the responsibility to his kids, his wife, to the world, and how does he balance all of that stuff? And it's like, these are things that really relate to my daily struggles, and they're put in this very palatable form of Tyler Hoechlin playing, in my opinion, so far one of the best interpretations of Superman.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like thanks, my mom made it for me, and that smile,
yeah,
that is every bit as good as like the going up moment in Superman the movie. When he rescues Lois, like the yeah, General Zod care to step outside, like I think Tyler Hoechlin's going to go down as in history as one of the best people to put on this costume. And this interpretation has the potential to be one of the better ones as well. So I'm just excited to see more of that. I'm not particularly jazzed about Elizabeth Tulloch as Lois yet, but I want to I want to
like
give her the
her.
room
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
I really hope that this show does not just relegate her to the wet blanket role.
Yeah.
Because in this first episode, she is very much the wet blanket that has to constantly remind everybody about Superman's actual responsibility to his kids.
Yeah.
I hope that them making the decision to stay in Smallville and him saying, I need to focus on this, I need to be more present, is sort of not the end of that storyline, but like the end of that phase of the story. Like we established this. Lois told him that he needed to do this stuff. Okay, let's get away from the nagging wife trope and let her be Lois Lane. And I really sincerely hope that that one of, I mean, they've really set up this Morgan Edge thing as a worthy rival for Lois.
Yeah, that she'll be able to like do some good and keep to, because it's like she wasn't fired from the planet. Like she should still be a reporter and be able to do stories.
I'm hoping that she quits. I hope that she quits and that she's like, I can do just as much good. I'm Lois Lane. I don't need the Daily Planet. And the day, like, I want there to be a conversation about the fact that the Daily Planet, and she's already said that, like, they've driven it into the ground, right? The fact that there's no Perry is a, like, there's no Perry White. That is a big, for Superman fans, like that's a big indicator of where the Daily Planet is in relation to the Superman story. They haven't established where this is in relation to the rest of the CW shows, which I think is really interesting because it kind of, if the continuity, and it doesn't matter because the crisis happened and everything changed, but and I think they need to address it at some point. They need to talk about it because in the pre-crisis version of the Arrowverse, because they weren't in the Arrowverse, they were in their own.
Right.
Superman and Lois just had a kid. They just had one child, not twins.
Yeah. I wondered, that's what I was like, I'm like pretty sure it was just one, so it's like this is different, right?
So this is different, and it's also they are much older, which means that Superman and Lois are much older, which means that they are a lot further along in their story than, so like to me it's like everything's already happened, right? Like Lex has already been dealt with. Metallo is a thing that they like, a person that they fought in the past. Maybe Doomsday has already happened in this version of the story. It'll be interesting to see how much of that they talk about and how much of that comes up, and how much of that has not happened yet.
Or that I'd be really okay if they didn't deal with it at all. Like if it just was like,
yeah, different. I think that it's important for placing the character and where he's at in his life. Like,
is he supposed to be the same one
as the one from Supergirl? Yeah, of course he is. But it's post-crisis, so post-crisis means that everything is different,
right? So that they had twins instead of one kid, and
but he's also one of the Paragons, right? I mean, like going back to Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh gosh, I have blocked that out of my brain. Right? I forgot so many things.
And they established that at the end that like the next crossover is the Justice League, right? Actually, that just happened, I think today or yesterday. It's like a previously on or something like that, and they've got the shot from the end of the Crisis crossover. With the 7 of them, only Batwoman has been erased from the thing, and Martian Manhunter moved over so that there's no gap, because Ruby Rose is not a part of the show anymore, and it's changed, right? Which is interesting and a little bit odd. Again, weird stuff at the CW. A weird decision to make, to be like, let's just pretend like this didn't happen, but we know it happened. It exists. Yeah. You can't just erase it and hope that everybody forgets, and doesn't ask the question of why Ruby Rose isn't part of this universe anymore. But because obviously there's more going on there than we are privy to. But whatever. Yeah, so yeah, he is definitely that Superman. But the question of, I mean, like with Supergirl ending this season as well, there is the question of like, is that ending because then because they want to avoid asking questions about like, well, when are Supergirl and Superman gonna cross over, or so that they can come back and be like,
right,
Supergirl can do a guest spot on Superman and Lois, like Melissa Benoist can come in and be an older version of the character, right? And establish that like this is years after that stuff. I don't know. That's kind of a question for me. Like that's a big question mark. Because the other part of it is like, well, I didn't necessarily like John Cryer as Lex for Supergirl. Like I think that he did a great job on that show. Yeah. I'm not caught up, but from what I saw, I'm like, I think that he did do a good job of that. I'm way more interested in seeing him against this Superman now, right? And not necessarily Tyler Hoechlin Superman from before this series, but the one that we have now seen in Superman and Lois, and having John Cryer as that older version of Lex facing off against this older, wiser, more mature version of Superman. Like I'm down for. So there's like good and bad to all of this, I think, and it'll just be
interesting
it'll be interesting to see how they choose to play it out, and what elements they choose to keep and what elements they choose to change, because they can change whatever they want because of the post-crisis nature of it, because they have the perfect out of like, yeah, well, that happened, that's continuity from before Crisis happened. Right. And it's like, okay, that's a valid answer. as much as it's a valid answer as it's ever been a valid answer in comic book storytelling of like, well, we rebooted the world, so that thing that we used to have to be beholden to, we no longer have to be beholden to. So
right.
We're going to do whatever we want. So I don't know. What's your favorite thing from this from the first episode?
I've been trying to like knock around in my head all of the different things that I like about, but I think I just love the aesthetic of figuring out what the show was and being like, yes, I'm in for Smallville 2.0. Like, because again, the thing that I missed in Smallville, like the thing that if I could have gone back and changed it, is to have more Lois and Clark. Like, that's the interesting part of Superman to me. But I also kind of liked what Smallville did and just being able to like explore different kinds of stories there. So I like that they could do some interesting stuff there. But I will say I'm interested to explore the Lois Clark Sam dynamic, like, or like general, like the her dad, and like how that sort of is like it seems like an interesting, you know, it accomplished what it should do in a pilot, right? It set up all the little beats that we're going to be watching for through the first like season, and it's like all the like different like antagonists and how they get through it, and that they let Superman succeed, right? Like they have the thing about the reactor, and he gets to save the day, right? And so you get to watch him save the day and then come back to his family.
Yeah.
Because then he gets to not save the day. Like it just becomes like more problematic for him the second. So it's kind of good. Like I just like that we got like a fully fleshed out, like we get to start the story like in media res, basically. That I love. That you take these characters and it's not like another origin story, but at the same time, it's an origin story for like Jordan.
Yeah.
So it's like I just like that, to be able to have tonally all the things I love from Superman and not having to start from scratch, but being able to like start in the middle of it and go forward.
You know what I love? I love a Superman story that isn't reliant on a Freak of the Week model.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We're hopefully, fingers crossed, never gonna have the conversation of like, man, weird stuff sure does happen in Smallville a lot. And it's like, don't get me wrong, Smallville framed it perfectly of like, hey, meteor rocks. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm really hoping that because Superman is Superman and he doesn't have to be tied down to this one geographic location, that the story, like the fantastical part of the story, can come from anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
It'll be drawn to Smallville because of his presence there, which I think is something that'll be fun for them to explore as well, which is like Superman decides to settle down in Kansas, and now all of a sudden Smallville, Kansas is the epicenter of a bunch of massive superhero fights. Huh. Interesting. Right? Like, is he a lightning rod for this stuff? Because that's the nature of storytelling, is that you in order to have conflict, you move your character out of the place where they have all the conflict, i.e. Metropolis, and trouble follows them, right? So it'll be interesting to see them wrestle with that, but I think that hopefully for the teenage storylines, it can focus on a little bit more realistic teenage angst, as opposed to the super heightened teenage angst mixed with meteor freaks that Smallville had, right? Like I would love to see them deal with superpowers in a similar way that the Power Rangers movie did from a few years ago, where it's like these teenagers have real problems. They also happen to be superheroes, right? Yeah. Like the fact that they are superheroes is not the problem. It's actually the escape from the problems that they have as teenagers. And I really hope that we get a similar sort of thing here of like Jordan having issues that are his own, and that being a superhero or having powers is a complication at times, but more often just an aspect of who he is, and not the source for the drama. Because like that, it gets so tired. Like, how many times can he laser a wall because he's horny? Because Smallville did that, and it, granted, It's one of the best episodes of the series, right? Right? Like,
oh, is that the one with the like sex ed video? And
yeah,
he like, yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Um,
oh man, early 2000s
yeah, and he has
television.
to learn to control it.
I
It's got
love
that
it.
great.
I love
Oh
it.
man, it's got that great scene with him and Jonathan, and they're standing out in the field, and he's like, Jonathan set up the scarecrow, and he's like, just you know, whatever you were thinking about when it happened before, just try and do that again. And he kind of like looks at him, and he's like, cool, yeah, I'll go stand further away from you then. Like, because it's just this awkward moment of like having to tell your dad that you shoot lasers out of your eyes when you yeah. I have a question for the Thunderquack audience. How many kids are listening to this podcast? I don't think that many. I think this is an adult audience, and we shy away from adult conversation sometimes. And sometimes we lean into it. And I'm afraid of saying the word erection on the podcast, and I don't think that I should be, because I think that our audience is okay with that.
Can I just say that
let me know.
There's a great because you said the word erection, and so now I have to say that there's this great meme that keeps coming up on my Pinterest where it's like, being a parent is weird. I have to teach my son that vagina is not a bad word, but that he also has to find a different name for his hamster. And I just think that is so great.
That is parenting in 2021.
Yeah,
look,
basically.
having to have a conversation with your kid about the appropriate times when they are allowed to explore themselves.
Right, yeah.
And the appropriate time being not when I'm in the room. And I think that that's a moment that is not something that our parents' generation, I think, had to deal with. I think that came in between generations of like this like that sort of like sex positive ideology of like, right. And I haven't had to have that conversation yet. So I'm not embarrassing Cara or Cassie at the moment. But just knowing that like that is somewhere in my future of like, hey,
and it's on your radar,
on your own time, kid.
Yeah,
like
you have to
like I'm not, because you have to have the conversation about it by like, you have to say like, hey, that's a totally natural and okay thing, and I have no problem with it, but also I have a real problem with this happening right now, so stop it. How do you balance those things? You know, and how do you do it when you're Superman and it involves heat vision?
I don't know.
I'm looking. I am really looking for. What day does this show air on? When did I tell you had to watch it?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like, is it Mondays? Like, I have zero idea.
No, it wasn't, because obviously we were recording a podcast.
But we didn't.
When did I tell you? When did I tell you?
You told me Tuesday. I feel like
I told you on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I told you on Wednesday, so it must have aired on Tuesday.
February 23rd. Yes, that was a Tuesday. So.
Yeah. So tomorrow. Or tonight, as you're listening to this, or maybe yesterday, because that's how podcasts work.
Right.
And dating ourselves in time is not a helpful thing usually.
Yeah. I will say though, I'm excited for the Lana casting. I like, as much as I don't want to hate Lana.
We're predisposed to it because of
to hate Lana
baggage,
but I quite like the Emmanuel. I have no idea how you say her last name, but like, because she was in Entourage, and I quite liked her in Entourage, and
yeah,
I think she's a great like, I saw her name come up in the opening credits, and I was like, oh, cool, who's she gonna play? And then I had this like tingling sensation where I was like, ah, crap, she's gonna be Lana, isn't she? And then like, you see her coming up, and you're like, damn it, I was right. But anyways, she's Canadian. Woohoo!
I really want to see where this show is going. I want it all now.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to binge it, but also it's so much better not binging. I'm kind of done with binging.
I need something to keep me going weekly.
Yeah.
I have Sunday nights John Oliver, and I have Fridays WandaVision, so now I'm kind of nice to have something during the week that I can enjoy.
Well, WandaVision is done after this week, but then it's a 1 week break. It's a 1 week break, and then it's Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Falcon and Winter Soldier, so that'll be good.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about this show. You got anything else to say?
Nope. I think we've covered.
We did it.
A lot of things.
We've been talking for about 2 hours, so I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. I hope that because I feel like my recording last night for the Patreon exclusive episode was a little bit meandering, and I didn't really make a point. And I feel like maybe I did that again tonight. But
what? No, we made so many points. It's all good.
Did we? Okay. I hope that the audience feels that way as well.
Hey,
here's the thing. I'm a little bit exhausted talking about this sort of stuff because I don't know how many times I can phrase "don't be a dick." You know what I mean? Like, yeah, because that's what it comes down to. Like, look at the person across from you and just treat them with the same respect that you want to be treated with, regardless of the color of their skin or what gender identity they have, or where they are in their journey with their sexuality. Like, just be cool, man. Just treat people like human beings. It does.
Yeah.
Even if a person comes up to you and says, I don't want to be treated like a human being, I want to be treated like a dog, you'd be like, cool, I'm going to respect your human right to tell me that. Which maybe sounds a little bit judgmental, but you know, like I think that we just all got to kind of be cool, because life is hard enough, especially right now in the midst of a global pandemic. We don't need to be making it harder on each other by worrying about things that should not separate us, you know? And I'm just exhausted with having that conversation.
That's right.
So on that note, thank you guys for having that conversation with us yet again.
And you know what you're in for. This is what this podcast is. So
and we appreciate you all for listening and supporting. Cool. We'll be back next week with our first episode of our MCU podcast to talk about WandaVision. So I guess we will see you next week, but in a different format.
Stay safe, everybody. Wash your hands and be kind to one another.
Follow the Thunderquack Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching the Thunderquack Podcast. You can support us in 3 ways. First, by heading to the podcast service of your choice and leaving a rating and review. Second, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch from your favorite podcasts. And last but not least, by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack to kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get cool rewards like early access, ad-free episodes, and extended episodes. The Thunderquack Podcast is the official podcast of thunderquack.com. Head to thunderquack.com to discover more great podcasts.